Beginning Hot Out podcast in 5, 4, 3, 2. This feed has been intercepted by Operation SwItChEroO. We control what you listen to now. Stand by for a podcast about something. They are located at apodcastaboutsomething.com or on Twitter at APA something. Something, nothing, anything, and everything. A podcast about something.
Hello and welcome to a podcast about something where each week we dive deep into whatever it is we find interesting. I'm your host, Calvin, and joining me from the hot gates is your co-host, Nick Richardson.
Hey man, it's a pretty hot day out here out at the hot gates, which gets its name from hot springs.
Does it? I didn't know that. And for you guys who are uninitiated, we are going to be talking about the Battle of Thermopylae today. Which,
yes, sir.
That's where the hot gates come from, just in case you were wondering.
It's the hot gates. You gotta enunciate that.
I mean, you
so
can
hot.
if you want to. I'm just going to say it like a normal, regular person says things. So,
yeah,
whatever.
People will probably close out if I start going hot all the time. So, yeah, hot it is.
Yeah, let's just go with hot. I'm good with that. So, the Battle of Thermopylae from the year 480-ish BC. Between the Greeks and the Persians. So what was your introduction to this battle? Because for me personally, freshman year of college, I had to read just this terribly, terribly boring book about it. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I want to say probably 8 months before 300 came out. And I had 300 was not on my radar. I had no idea who Zack Snyder was, didn't know the movie was coming out. But I read this book barely, fell asleep most times trying to read it. Wrote the paper on it, mostly forgot about it. 300 comes out on DVD, so this would probably been a year and a half later. I watched the movie. I'm like, holy shit, this is that terrible book I read. The movie was much better than that book. I couldn't even tell you the name of the book, but it was for a history class, and it was not good.
Most of those are pretty dry. The difference is in the professor.
Professor was not great. It was because he would do this thing that was like, all right, you guys read this book, and when, at the end of the 3 weeks I give you to read the book, we'll write the paper on it. But during that time, we're going to just study completely different things. So it wasn't like classes every day on that book. It was, you guys read this book, in 3 weeks we'll do one class on it, and you guys will turn in your papers. So it was weird.
Here's this dry-ass book. Read it in your spare time, and good luck.
Yeah. We'll be back. We'll come back to it.
Not fun, dude. Yeah, that would immediately make me like that book a whole lot less.
Well, it was like one of those things okay, it's got to be done in 3 weeks. So every time you get bored, you just put it down. I'll finish it later. I don't think I even finished it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's when the internet started coming around big time. So it's okay, what's Spark Notes? Let's go. Been there, brother.
Got me a C on the paper. That's all I need.
That's all that matters. Got to get that passing.
So what was your introduction?
Yeah, mine, my dad, history buff, blah, 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 but he had a book on the Peloponnesian Wars, which, had a little segment in there. So I read it, couldn't comprehend it as a kid, a young kid. So my real introduction was high school, which was your standard, the Battle of Thermopylae, and the Spartans are amazing, and they're impervious to everything, but they all died. So, beware of that.
Impervious to everything except death.
Yes, death comes for us all, my friend.
Yes. Not today.
Not today.
It's a little preview for next week for you people out there.
Right? We got to get this one out in the first place. When I got to college is when it got really fun. Mm-hmm. I had to read one of those dry-ass books, again.
I wonder if it was the same book.
Professor, possibly.
Had an orange cover. That's all I remember about it.
Mine had a guy that just looked way too happy to be digging in the mud.
No, that wasn't the same one.
He looked like, I don't know, Nigel Thornberry come to life, and he's just like, yay! But my professor was fantastic, Doc Roberts.
Shout out, Doc.
Doc Roberts, if you're probably dead by now, but he was old as shit, man.
R.I.P. Doc.
he'd always talk about, I'm gonna go home and crack open a Milwaukee's Best. That was like the highlight of his weekend. But he was a fantastic professor, and we spent like 3 weeks on the battle, analyzing it. Oh, it was super fun.
I would have much rather done that than the other things we were doing in that class, or trying to read this book. Like the first like 8 chapters of this book were dedicated to like the Persian dynasty and Xerxes' family tree and King Darius before it, all this bullshit that was just like, it was like, I don't know, I can't even relate it to anything. It was just like reading, like, this guy was this guy's father, and then he attacked this place and got this region into the Persian control, and then he died, and then the next guy came along and he got a different region in the Persian control, and they had 6 million warriors. Like, it was just numbers and dates and people and places, but it wasn't like, let's talk about the battle. And then it finally got to the battles in like the last 6 chapters, and that part was fun.
Yeah, well, they gotta fill up them pages somehow.
Yeah, first 8 chapters were the Persian dynasty, and then they did like 5 on what the Spartans were, and Leonidas and his family tree. And it's like, Jesus Christ, just land the plane. Let's kill some Persians here.
Let's do it for Sparta, son.
Yeah, this is Sparta.
This is Sparta. Such a good movie. But anyway,
we're not going to talk too much about the movie. We've both seen it, obviously.
Yes.
But I just watched like the first half of it today. I was trying to fit the whole thing in, just didn't have time. I actually had to like work and stuff today. It was rough. But yeah, but it's surprisingly accurate.
It really is, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's as accurate as we can expect for a movie that's about a battle that happened 2,500 years ago, that's made by the guy who also brought us Sucker Punch. Like, that's what you get when you got Zack Snyder directing a movie over
interpretation.
25. Yeah.
Well, and I'll touch on a point about that later on when we kind of reach it.
About Sucker Punch?
No.
Yeah, we're gonna, the 300 talk will be at the end of the towards the end, but we will talk a little 300. There's a bit of conflation between, because there are 2 Persian invasions of Greece, and so the movie kind of conflates both of them, like facts from both of them, to make this story more interesting.
It helps make it make sense.
Yeah, because like otherwise you'd have the first 20 minutes of the movie explaining Darius and the Xerxes family tree and who the Spartans are.
Yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Turn into that book I read. So yeah, we'll talk 300 a little bit, but for the most part, we want to focus on the battle, what scholars think happened during the battle. Like, nobody actually knows. It's a lot of guesswork, educated guesswork, not by us, by other people who are much smarter than us, or at least much smarter than me.
Me too. I don't claim to be a historian. Most of these people were in that field.
Yeah, exactly. I did a lot of Wikipedia research, so
nice.
That's as good as I can bring to it.
Well, I'm sure in your Wikipedia research you came across the name Herodotus.
Yes, he's one of the guys.
Yep, he's one of the main players who kind of, he's the historian of the Western world. We know a lot from Herodotus.
Seem to inflate the numbers of this battle quite a bit, though.
Big time. But luckily, I did find some numbers that's kind of between him and 2 other guys that actually, sounds about right. It was numbers where they actually had roughly the same, within 100 or 2.
Yeah. And
so it's like, okay, I'm going to take those numbers, but not his 2 million and, this guy's 120K.
Right. Yeah. So, but kind of want to give a background of kind of what led to the battle and who the different factions involved were. So pretty much, like I said, this was the Battle of Thermopylae happened during the second invasion of Greece by the Persians. The first one was failed by King Xerxes' father, King Darius.
Darius the Great.
Was he the Great?
I believe that was Darius the Great. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. I'm almost positive that's Darius.
He probably called himself Darius the Great, just as Xerxes called himself God King. But whatever. These guys, a lot of made up nicknames. Self-proclaimed nicknames back in the day.
Yeah, you could claim you're a god and people would believe it, so.
Well, yeah, once you conquer and subjugate them, they're willing to believe anything. That's going to keep them alive, too.
I don't know about believe, but they'll go along with it.
Right,
because people like to live.
So the Persians reached Greece during the Spartan celebration of Carnea, which it's basically their harvest festival, I want to say. And the Spartans can't do battle during Carnea.
Well, it was also the Olympic Games as well. Right. So they had that was pretty much the double jeopardy. You do not engage in warfare or else.
Leonidas decided to consult the Oracle of Delphi and was given a prophecy. I'm going to read the prophecy, try and stay with me here. O ye men who dwell in the streets of broad Lacedaemon, honor the festival of the Carnea. Otherwise, either your glorious town shall be sacked by the children of Perseus, or, in exchange, must all through the whole Laconian country mourn for the loss of a king descendant of the great Heracles. So basically, hey, guys, don't fight.
Yeah,
we're good.
Don't fight, and Leonidas, this is about you.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I will say, after consulting with the
Leo.
Oracle, he still took his case to, the elders, whatever you want to call it.
I thought it was the other way. Well, in the movie, they portray it the other way around. He goes to the elders, and they consult the Oracle. Either way, it doesn't matter. He talks to everyone, trying to let them, be like, hey, let me go.
Well,
nobody's giving.
That is one big difference. Actually, the elders did, but not in the way they saw it as a big enough threat that after dealing with, and almost losing the whole country during the Battle of Marathon, and the Athenians win, they knew Xerxes wasn't playing. And he
Xerxes
had
does not fuck around.
Well, and I mean, he did some crazy feats that they didn't depict in 300, and a lot of people don't know. Like, he connected pontoon boats to cross the Hellespont. So they had that in the back of their mind. That is crazy. That is an amazing feat of engineering. And I mean...
Yeah, Nick did a lot more research for this than I did. I had a pretty stacked week at work, so he's going to be throwing this shit at me all day, and I love it. I really like the idea of this battle, which is weird because of my first introduction to it was so terrible.
So dry. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, but so I was like, this is just stupid. I would never be into it. But like, just the idea behind it, of everything that went into it and how it moved along progress for the Greeks, is kind of cool.
It's super fascinating, and I mean, it's one of the hinge points of history, which I just fascinates the shit out of me.
We'd all be Asian right now if this didn't happen.
Oh man,
but we'll get to that when we get to that.
But yeah, they. So he has made this giant army come with him, and I mean, they hugely inflate numbers most of the time, but it's still massive. And to move them along while crossing the Hellespont and just starting to roll up town. So I mean, there was fear brewing among a non-fearful people, which
the Spartans, they're always ready for battle.
That's what they do.
It's weird to see them not like be a little hesitant to go into a battle. But yeah, like you said, Leonidas, he consulted the Oracle, he consulted the elders. The elders kind of went along with him, basically bringing his 300 bodyguards to battle.
Yes.
And that's how they got there. Yep. He couldn't call his full army, couldn't go into full-on war, but he could, go for a stroll with his bodyguards.
Go scout,
as they put it in the movie.
But they also only took those 300 men that had sons, which I thought was super dope as well, because I think you would have to give into that as, like, I don't know, you'd have to make that concession, because then you're not costing the state anything, and ultimately the state of Sparta...
They have warriors to replace the warriors you're about to lose.
Exactly.
Because everybody kind of knew going in that this is a suicide mission.
Right, and he didn't have the full support of the state, so he was going to have to get it on the way, which is crazy when you think about it. Like, hey, go out there and see if you can get some people.
And there were several factions involved. We have the Spartans and the Persians, and then there were several other Greek factions in there as well, helping the Spartans. Give us a little background on all these people.
There was
on who was in the battle.
There was quite a few actually that made up the the compilation of Greek city-states.
Of Greeks. Yeah.
But the big players were Athens, obviously the democratic seat of ancient Greece. Like, it's one of...
Shout out Athens.
Yep, thank you for thinking big thoughts. You guys are great.
Yeah, just thinking, really.
You are awesome, and democracy is a little bit messed up right now, but it's pretty cool. I'd rather be in a democracy than communism. That's for damn sure.
Or under Persian control.
right? But they had the Navy, so they had what Sparta did not, obviously.
Well, and they, at the same time as the battle, we should probably mention this, that at the same time as the Battle of Thermopylae, there was a naval battle going on at Artemisium.
Yes.
Which was mostly between Athens and the Persians as well. So that these two battles are going concurrently, and what happens at Thermopylae ends up helping kind of what's going on at Artemisium in the end of it.
Absolutely, and that was thanks to Athens' massive buildup before the war. They ordered, I want to say, 1,000 triremes, which is, obviously crap. There was probably 100, which is still
some Euron Greyjoy shit.
Hopefully, they didn't have any.
Build me 10,000 ships. Oh, they're done next week. You come pick them up.
Oh, cool. Here I am. I need 20,000 men across the sea in 4 hours.
Westeros isn't that big. It's okay.
Yeah, it takes about 15 minutes to get to the wall. Whatever. It's right up the road.
Yeah, no worries.
But there was Athens.
And we should also, sorry to cut you off again, but we should also mention that Carnea was only a Spartan celebration, so the rest of Greece could actually do battle at this time.
They were eager
which is
to do
why
battle.
the Battle of Artemisium is going on. It's just the Spartans were the closest to Thermopylae. They had the best chance of getting there to defend it. That's why Leonidas, and they're the best warrior, like land cavalry warriors. Infantry,
yeah.
not cavalry.
They're the best with it.
They're the best warriors.
Miles.
I mean, because that's what they do. So they would have been the closest ones and the best suited to stop them in this tactical spot. Which we'll get into the tactics behind that.
But which is really fun whenever we get there. So the Spartans obviously a major player. They're the ones who, along with Athens, or Eritrea, I want to say, were the ones who threw the emissaries into basically to their deaths. So the Spartans were.
Now I read that happened during the first. That part of it actually happened during the first invasion.
Was it? So
that's what I read. I could be wrong. Like, this is all Wikipedia, and it's from a few days ago. I didn't write that down, but I thought that happened in the first invasion. Like, they sent the emissaries, and they were like, "No, you're not getting anything from us," and threw them down the well.
It's quite possible.
It doesn't matter.
If it, I don't know. I may be misremembering, but either way you look at it, Sparta had picked a fight. They sent two of their own to atone for it, I guess. But they were the most badass motherfuckers on earth at that time when it came to close quarters, sword, spear combat. Like, they were great tacticians. That's what they did. Mm-hmm. They were excellent. Had the best technology for the time.
And the upbringing of Spartan men is something else that the movie gets mostly right. That basically you're just thrown into battle from the day you're, I don't know, old enough to understand what fighting
exactly.
is.
And you gotta kill people.
And it's just battle and battle and battle. Yeah,
it's not fun.
I don't know about the whole thing about sending them out to fight a wolf all alone. Like, that might be a little
in the snow barefoot.
Fabricated. Yeah, that might be fabricated. I don't know. I wasn't there. But for the most part, like, just throwing them in to fight, and babies who weren't perfect were kind of tossed aside.
They bred Terminators, basically.
Yeah.
Well armored, well trained Terminators, and that's kind of how I've always looked at the Spartans, which I find awesome. They got the best of the best armor. That's really their entire GDP of the year.
Sweet 6-pack eggs.
Yeah, no kidding. Enough to really, have. It's kind of like the Batman nipples. They're just so serious. You got to have them, fitted around. And then the Persians, who, as a people, were just a conglomerate of,
Yeah, they're a mishmash.
Oh, everybody.
Basically, every Asian region available at Persia. The Persian Empire reached mostly across Asia at the time,
and were obviously comprised of some of the oldest peoples known to man. They have knowledge, they have experience, they have size on their side. So it's
right. And the Persians. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say it's a very David and Goliath moment.
Mm-hmm. And the Persians had a propensity for figuring out who knew what and how to kind of play into whoever they were conquering strengths. So you conquer a region, and you subjugate most of them, but you keep their leaders on as now your generals and things. And I don't know if this happened in real life either, but in the movie that Xerxes, there's a moment where he basically says, kneel now to Leonidas, kneel now, and you'll be commander of the whole Persian infantry, basically. And that was something that the Persians did, is they were very forward thinking and accepting of ideas from other cultures. They wanted you to basically be their slaves, but they would accept your ideas and use them if they were better than the ideas they already had.
Well, not even that. They kind of absolutely that. I didn't mean to discount that. But it was very much a live and let live mentality, kind of like the Mongolians. You could practice what religion you want, you could do what you want, but damn it, you had to pay your due to the king or, the leader or whoever was in charge, whether it be Xerxes, Kublai Khan. They're very, very similar in that.
And they in both invasions, the first and the second, they promised the Greeks, you can have your way of life, but you're ours.
Yes, we want
and
the money.
The Greeks weren't having
You
it.
want the money and
because
the
I think the Greeks could probably see that, yeah, you say that now to get us to agree with you, but how long is that actually going to last?
Absolutely. And
for the majority of the people, it would last for people like Leonidas who had something to add to the Persians, or some of the forward-thinking Athenians, like that. Some people would stay around and get to live their life the way they want, but there would be a lot of people who would not get to live the life that they planned for.
Absolutely not. And no one wants to be owned. No one wants to answer to someone who is...
That's strange.
Well, absolutely. And I could not even imagine being, being held to a high standard by a foreign power who could basically kill me at any time they wanted if they don't like. I'm basically, you can stay if you want. It's you brought the booze, you can hang out for a while. That weird guy, you know what I mean? No one wants to be treated that way, especially not these forward-thinking Western countries who, in their own right, have contributed amazing amounts to philosophy, history, stuff like that. They stand on equal footing.
For the most part, yeah. And so the second invasion of Greece, I thought was super interesting of kind of why it happened. Because the first invasion, they're just basically trying to expand as much as they can expand and conquer as much as they can conquer. But during the second invasion, it wasn't started by Xerxes. It was started by his father Darius before he died in a revolt from Egyptians, I want to say.
486 BC, I want to say.
Yeah, something like that. So basically, Darius wanted to just punish anyone who was involved in any revolt against his rule, which this included the Greeks that had revolted during the Ionian revolt. So the first Persian invasion of Greece, it failed at the Battle of Marathon. And basically, just in response to that, Darius is like, fuck this. I'm getting the biggest army I can ever get just for Greece.
Watch me.
Yeah. It was just like, you know what? You guys want to revolt? Like, I'm coming at you with everything that can possibly be. And, well, it didn't work.
Still didn't work.
Then Xerxes finished Darius's job. Yeah. But basically, he was just petty. He was like, I don't like you guys because you beat me. So now I'm going to beat you even harder.
Right. I'm taking, it's Tom Haverford. I like being the guy with the ball because when I left, I got to take the ball home and no one could play. That's what I felt like Darius and Xerxes to a great extent were doing.
Well, yeah, Xerxes was definitely just like a petulant child, like a trust fund baby who's like, well, daddy said that I need to do this, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah, watch me, guy. I could see him just being a absolute shit. And I'm even with the way Zack Snyder portrayed him in like 300 and how I've seen in, just old books.
I was actually a little disappointed with his portrayal.
In 300?
Yeah, because I had read this book and it was basically told like he's this godlike figure, like 8 feet tall, like super big, like basically Zion Williamson, but 2 feet taller and just as intimidating.
Yeah, no shit.
And
just not on the hardwood.
Like I just didn't get that from the portrayal in 300. He was just like, I guess he was more flamboyant.
He was very
than I expected.
Odd.
Which kind of also goes with the Persian style of like he fashions himself a god, so he's going to do whatever the hell he wants and be who he wants. And as forward thinking, he reminded me more of like Oberyn Martell, like pansexual. I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Yeah. That rather than just like this domineering figure of like, that dude's fucking scary.
He's not a Leonidas figure. He's not like a Thor type guy who's just 8 feet tall,
there you go.
blonde, and gigantic muscles. He's a more of a thinker, which I thought was cool. He's a ruthless thinker, but dude was a great
Son
tactician.
of Disappointed is right, because anytime I've seen the movie since then, like I do like his portrayal in that movie. It just wasn't it subverted my expectations when I went. I was expecting them to like put Shaq in there, basically.
It was too much, yet not enough at the same time.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I looked at it. And Shaq would have been a terrible pick, but if they could have got...
No. Not Shaq.
Dude, that'd be so
not
fun.
actual Shaq. Somebody with the, like, stature of Shaq.
In 300, you see Shaq. Hey, Leonidas. Hey, I need you.
I am Xerxes.
Kneel, bitch. I can see it. Sorry. That was a tangent.
Sorry,
on mine.
Shaq.
Yeah. Shaq, if you're listening, you the man.
I mean, go back to being Kazam, Shaq. You're good at that.
No, sir. You sucked.
And yeah, so going into this, there's pretty high stakes for Greece and for Sparta and also for the conquering Persian Empire. Do you want to talk to that?
Absolutely. You're 100% right, where, like we've said before, this was a turning point for humanity. And I think, obviously, what they wouldn't know is going to go down in history quite like this, but I think everybody involved knew this was a big deal. And, I mean, Greece and especially the Spartans, they're fighting for dominance of the country. They are a leading power. They don't want to be pushed to the side. They don't want to lose their way of life, like we said. It's...
Well, yeah, for Sparta and for Greece as a whole, to them it was would have been the death of free thinking.
It's like if someone parachuted into America and started saying, yeah, you guys are going to serve us now. Like if North Korea invaded America, hell no, we would absolutely not stand for that shit.
North Korea would need a lot bigger army to live up to that analogy. But yeah, it's basically
China,
the same thing of
China.
like,
Let's go with China.
You're okay being here, but you're going to live the way we want you to, and you're going to think the way we want you to. And if you think outside of what we want you to, if we don't like it, then you're no good to us.
You're done.
So free thinking is allowed until we don't like it, and then you're
pretty
done.
much. So the Persians. I do want to say one more thing. Legacy. Every society wants to, be a part of, leave a lasting legacy. You think the Romans didn't want to be known forever, or the Egyptians,
you don't
or something like that?
Right. You don't want to be the ones responsible for the fall of your way of life.
Hell no. And this was viewed as that. And luckily it wasn't a one-sided affair, because I think Greece would have rolled Persia more than it wouldn't have had any stakes if Persia didn't have a stake in it as well. Because if they lose to a bunch of cobbled together city-states from a society of people that they look at as unsophisticated and barbarian-esque, and how would that, you couldn't be an empire if you lost.
Well, because, right, the Persians think they're forward-thinking and accepting of other cultures, and the way at the time the Greek city-states were set up is like Athens was the forward-thinking city-state. Sparta was the military city-state. They had all these different factions that basically did different things. So the Persians thought that they were, as a whole, all of that combined.
Yes.
And to some extent they were, but also at the same time they weren't, because you couldn't be too free-thinking in the Persian society without getting got.
Yeah, incurring the wrath of somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Because if anyone was free-thinking enough to go, well, maybe this dude isn't a god, then, they're out. Sorry.
Yeah, peace. Hey, you wanna come behind this place and see a sharp thing I got? Come on over.
It doesn't make sense that this dude is a god. Like, I saw him, I saw his mother give birth to him, like, just like the same way I saw this lady give birth to this kid. Like, there's no way he's a god, because that doesn't make sense. That you can't think that way in person.
No, and they'll do some crazy shit and wipe your entire family off the face of the earth. Like,
yeah, pull some Reigns of Castamere shit.
Dude, I wonder if Xerxes had his own Reigns of Castamere that he played.
I don't know.
Fuck up Greece. They had a little anthem.
Yeah, it would just be solely focused on like how they can beat Greece. Like, they're not even worried about anything else at this point.
Egypt sucks. Greece is worse. And a lot of tambourines and probably some bells of some kind. That'd be fascinating.
Well, and another thing kind of at stake for the Persians here, Greece was kind of a gateway to the rest of Europe.
Yes, and
Greece is, kind of in the southern portion of Europe, if my geography is correct. I'm not great at geography. But if you conquer Greece, you get their armies, which were vast and good. And you also get a gateway to the rest of Europe.
Yes, absolutely.
You find ways in, and you have the Spartans, who you let them continuing living their way of life and raising warriors. So now you have an army of great warriors. You also have them teach your armies how to fight the way they fight. The Athenians had a great army and a great navy as well. You inherit that as you conquer Greece. So, there was more to it than Persia just being petty and mad that they revolted. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they were mad and petty because they revolted.
That was I think the gateway to the western part of Europe, I want to say, was almost a secondary concern. Because, oh my God, the Greeks besmirched my father's legacy and his honor. I gotta make my legacy better again. I gotta patch that up. But you're 100% right, dude. If they got through Greece, most of those societies were pretty primitive at the time still, compared to these warring powers, but still, I can't imagine we would never have so much free thinking. We probably never had the Crusades, but we'd never have the Renaissance either.
That might be okay.
Yeah.
Crusades weren't always as great as Robin Hood makes them out to be.
No.
Shout out Kevin Costner. So, we're like halfway through this thing. Should we actually talk about the battle at some point?
Definitely, dude.
So the Spartans they decided that they were going to take the fight closer to the Persians. They weren't just going to wait where they were. They wanted to go to Thermopylae, the south side of Thermopylae, where this structure called the Hot Gates lies. And the Hot Gates is this narrow passageway with kind of a wall built into one side. And then if you get far enough over to the wall, it's basically just cliffs that it's not a sheer cliff like they show in the movie, but it's still like cliffs and valleys. Like, it's not stable ground once you kind of get off to the side of the wall. So this was a very strategic position for them because they could use their smaller numbers to their advantage at that point and kind of block this area off. They got the Hot Gates, they got the cliffs, and then there's an interesting, on the mountains to the other side, there's a pass that could be used to outflank the Greeks. The Greeks have, if somebody were to find
Sons
it
of
somehow.
Guns. But I don't know how that would happen. Perfect place.
We'll look into that.
Well, they knew, like you said, they were going to want to roll up Greece, so that was the place to do it. That was access to southern Greece. Off the cliffs was the sea, at a distance. So the Athenians parked right there.
Yeah, they had a blockade.
You can't get in through the sea, and if you're in that funnel place, that takes away the Persians' best units, which are their cavalry.
Right, their numbers don't count for anything when. In an open field, when you have 10,000 versus 7,000, and we'll get into the actual numbers on each side, like the 10,000 is going to overwhelm the 7,000 in quite easily because you can flank and do all that stuff. But when when you're going 10,000 against 7,000 and the 7,000 have their backs to walls, you can't get around. You have to go head to head with them. So you can only fight, that front line versus that front line. You can't do anything else.
You got to go through them.
Right.
And
Which
that's
is
tough.
Yeah, that's hard, especially with how the Greeks fight. So let's talk
Yes.
numbers on each side.
Let's do
What
it.
did you find for the Persians?
Okay, for the Persians, and this is from Herodotus to basically every other. So 2.6 million men was what Herodotus said. 4 million was another one by a contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
Most people let it fall on between 120,000 to 300,000.
Yeah, that's where modern scholars are, right in that.
I'm going with around 100,000. I don't even think it's that high. Is that just be impossible? The logistics of that in ancient times? No way. No way.
So my note was anywhere from 120,000 to 4 million people in the Persian army, depending on who you ask. It's
yes, exactly.
Depending on which way if you're rounding up or down.
Yeah, no kidding. Just round up if you make it sound cool. But the Spartans were roughly 7,000.
Well, the Greeks were
7,000 strong. Yeah,
Spartans
absolutely.
were the 300. The 300 Spartans went there.
Well, it's the 300 Spartan hoplites, so they're like the
warriors.
Basically, they're the hardest warriors. They're the ones with all the body armor and all the training. But there was also the Lacedaemonians is basically just Greeks,
right?
And so they were joined on the way by quite a few people from all throughout Greece. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, you got the rest of the Spartans, the Mantineans, the Tegeans, the Arcadians, which you hear about, and 50 other things. But the big ones are the Phocians, the Arcadians, and the Lacedaemonians / 300 Spartans. Those are your big players, specifically because those Phocians were the 1,000
really hard pronouncing ancient Greek words.
Yes. Most of it comes from Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
I had to, you sent me the outline for this, and you, to your credit, you spelled Thermopylae correctly, and I'm like, that can't be right. And I had to Google it, and I've looked at the word Thermopylae like 100 times probably, and I was like, no, he didn't spell it right. Let me look it up, and you had it right.
I misspell it all the time.
Yeah, it's a very easy word to misspell.
Well, shit, son, this is America. I don't want to spell stuff like that.
I spelled it that way, so that's how it's spelt, damn it. I seen it that way.
I seen it. You kill someone with your bare hands. I seen it. But you mentioned something that possibly could undo the Spartan force if they, possibly got a pass, if you will.
Oh, we're going to talk about that now?
We can throw it out there if you want.
No, that was
let me say this. So we've established there's a pass.
Yep.
The Phocians were set to guard said pass. Yeah. That's so they're responsible for this.
Those Phocians like their sleep. They were a groggy type.
They were a bit groggy, and there's bitches.
There were no Spartans. We'll say that.
No. So if you look at it this way, it's basically you have your all-star point guard, and then he's got your rest of your starting five who are maybe I don't know, really good. You could win the finals with them.
JJ Redick's got to be on your team, all right? And that's who the Phocians were. They're JJ Redick. They're specialists. They didn't belong protecting the pass by themselves. Let's say that.
They're more Jimmer for debt. I'm going with that one.
You can't put JJ Redick on LeBron James and expect him to defend.
Can't put Derrick Rose on LeBron James. I'm still bitter about Bulls losing to the Cavs. That's a different story.
Yeah, well, let's not talk about, let's not get too deep in the weeds there. Let's talk about the Greeks' tactics versus the Persians' tactics, how they expected to fight. How about you go over what the Greeks did, and I'll go over what the Persians did.
Sounds good. You touched on what the Greeks, their tactic of being in a defensive position, and for once they weren't the attacking force. Obviously, you're outnumbered, so they rope-a-doped them. They played the long game. They made their numbers count for nothing. They made sure they, quote unquote, couldn't be flanked. They picked the best geographical position. There's not much else you can do to play a defensive scheme.
Right. Yeah. And they defended the hot gates. That was their spot. And then with the Greek phalanx, like there was no way through that.
I obviously missed that. I shouldn't have. But the phalanx was their most famous tactic. And when it's when it's tight and it's sound, and they can basically not focus on being flanked 24/7, it's just water on rock, man. You will cut them down constantly. It's the best defensive, scheme in most of ancient combat next to like the Roman legions. They basically stole from the phalanx too.
The Unsullied as well in Game of Thrones.
Yes.
We got a lot of Game of Thrones teasers in here, if you will. Yeah. Stay tuned. But the phalanx is just basically in the way they overlap their shields, and then they layered their spears, and they use these super thick and oversized shields, and then their spears were kind of extra long, and with the way that they set up and protected each other's sides, the Persians couldn't get through because their spears were so long that they could attack at long range. Persians had shorter spears or swords that they couldn't beat them in hand-to-hand combat, basically. I read a few other things that the Greeks did. They actually, because they didn't have to use everyone at once in their defensive position, they were able to rotate in and out units to prevent fatigue. So this is where like hockey shifts came from. Like, hockey coaches, they watch the Greek phalanx and are like, hey, we can do that. Just move people in and out. Let's get it.
But I mean, isn't that so cool that they had the wherewithal to do something like that? So wearing the armor they got, and 300 fucked this up so bad. They're not bare chested.
They don't wear any armor.
Yeah, these dudes are covered head to toe in copper, bronze armor, and that stuff back then was tough. Basically, if the Persians weren't up close firing arrows at them, those were completely useless, and they had giant shields, which protected the man next to them as well as themselves. And they were so good with spears, it's ridiculous, because that's the focus of the phalanx. I mean, precision strikers.
The shields only do so good. Like at some point, you have to actually attack the people who are attacking you also. So yeah, they're very good with spears, and they had spearmen, kind of further back in the phalanx that could accurately hit people, on the front lines, the enemies on the front lines. So it was the people on the front lines, basically stabbing at the other team, for lack of a better word, because I'm not doing good with words right now. And there was also people further back that could throw the spears as well. And then I even read at one point, this is when the Immortals were attacking, and I'll get into what the Immortals are and things like that in a minute. The Greeks ran a fake retreat and then just turned around and started attacking them. Yes, which I was like, that's pretty funny.
Well, I mentioned the Mongolians earlier. That's where they got this idea from, is the Greeks were masters at feigning retreat, and then while they're chasing you, basically setting the phalanx and just slaughtering the shit out of them. And when you have a force of that many coming at you, forward momentum's a bitch, dude. You're falling on that spear. Like, they didn't have to do much. And that's incredible that a force of 7,000 can just take on concurrent wave after wave after wave of men.
Yeah, so how the Persians attacked, their first attack was Xerxes sent out 5,000 archers to just bombard them with arrows, and they just bounced off the armor pretty much. And not effective.
And 100 yards away.
100 meters away, yeah, and just nothing.
It is meters, yes. So 300 yards. That's really not that far when you think about it.
So then once that didn't work, he sent basically frontal assault after frontal assault in waves of 10,000 men. After, again, there's only 7,000 on the other side that are rotating in and out as you go. Well, there's really down to 6,000 because the Phocians are gone. What do we call them? Phocians. They're gone. They're not attacking. So it's only like 6,000 Greek at this point, just fending off wave after wave of 10,000 men. So that's not working. Yeah. So that's not working. So then they send in the Immortals, and these are the elite corps of the Persian army. And in the movie, they use like magic and shit, which probably not true. I don't think they went to Hogwarts or anything like that. But they were super dope fighters. Like they knew what they were doing. These were the Spartans of the Persian military. And again,
super experienced.
This is a group of 10,000 men going after a much smaller group. Can't do anything there. And that's on day one. It's just wave after wave. Day two starts. We probably should have mentioned this at some point. The standoff lasted 7 days with 3 days of actual battle.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 4.5 days were just like sitting at each other, staring at each other.
Yeah. So, dude, you gonna do something?
Yeah.
What's up, bro?
So then on day two, Xerxes sends, I think like 1 or 2 more waves. They get bounced back. He thought, that they'll be tired by now. They don't have that many men. They'll be worn down. We'll be able to get through.
The first day took a toll.
Yeah. Still doesn't fucking happen. Sorry, Xerx. Mm-mm. These guys are out. So he actually withdraws his troops. And just he just stops. He's like, all right, let's regroup. Let's figure something else out. And that's when he's approached by this dude, Ephialtes.
Ephialtes, the piece of shit.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
He was the one who informed them of the pass that went behind the Greeks.
Yep. And so Ephialtes has now been turned into, I don't want to say a swear word, but basically it means nightmare in the Greek language now.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like how we would refer to someone as a Benedict Arnold.
That's a great analogy, dude. Jesus Christ. That's fantastic.
Bad with words, but good with analogies today. So after learning about the mountain pass from Robb Stark and his direwolf, they send 20,000 men up the mountain pass to attack whoever's waiting, or to basically encircle, to outflank the Greeks.
Yes.
And that's where we get back to our sleeping Phocians.
Our Phocian brethren. They were caught off guard so hard.
They heard some rustling in the woods and decided they needed to mount up.
Hey, what's that? They were the ghost hunters. Yeah. What's that? Did you hear that? So
they retreat back to a little further off, and the way the Persians got past them is they shot arrows at them.
Yeah.
And then just kept going. Like they didn't shoot arrows to attack them. They shot arrows to make them think that there was an attack coming, and then they just didn't attack. They just fucking went down their path.
Peace. So they circumnavigated them pretty. The Phocians are.
Yeah, the Phocians are really the Star Lord of this group.
They're dicks. They got pinned down.
Spider-Man had the Infinity Gauntlet off. Quill, just leave him alone.
See my Twitter at @alone_podcast, and you will see my feelings on Peter.
It's all part of the plan. It's all
bastard. So they shot arrows at him, and they hid behind some rocks. Basically, they're like, "Man, we're really sleepy," and this guy weren't
hiding behind the rocks. They were defending the rocks. They needed a better position to defend from, so they went off the path to make sure that they could defend the path. Obviously.
After you, sir. I got to defend over here. This is my spot. Never.
Don't trust the Phocians.
Yeah, bastards. If a Phocian person, if they still exist, hears this, we're going to get some hate mail.
Yeah, that's true. And unless if you're a descendant of Ephialtes, then we're going to just say fuck you as well.
Yeah.
But that was the turning point of the war.
Yes.
Them finding the pass. And I said Robb Stark earlier that's kind of what Robb did in the Song of Ice and Fire books with Grey Wind. Grey Wind, while Robb Stark is sleeping, would go and find these kind of paths that nobody else would know. He'd find hunting paths and things like that because he's a wolf and can move. And because Robb Stark may have some otherworldly powers, he can see what Grey Wind's seeing while he sleeps.
He has some dreams that tell him, how to win wars.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this was the undoing of the Greeks. They didn't give credit where credit was due. That if they're trying to blow through you anyways, if they find you can't defend 20,000 men through that. And Leonidas knew he was fucked, held a quick war council, and said, all right, y'all, most of you got to bounce.
Yeah, he said if you want to go, you can go. And to his credit, there's a lot of people stayed.
There's debate about whether he told them to go or whether he ordered them to go, or
whether they just went.
Yeah, which I'm sure it was probably a combination of all.
I can tell you what, the Phocians, they just left. They didn't give a shit.
They never were seen again. They just they ghosted themselves because they're such assholes.
But
after they held their war council, you're right. Quite a few men stayed behind. Nearly 2,000 is what I read, comprising of all kinds of different people.
Yeah, and then on that last day for their last stand, they actually met the Persians out in open field battle. They weren't defending the hot gates anymore at this point. They basically wanted to go down in a last stand. Some people say it was to allow time for the Greeks who were escaping to escape and go back and tell their stories. Some say it was to create like a rear guard for them. There's a lot of others just say like they're tired of fighting. Like there's a lot of different theories on why they did this, but I think it's kind of probably a combination of everything.
Absolutely. I think 3,000 or however many survived, they were able to get away. That's people they can find another day. Now, anything smaller than the 2K men that remain probably would have been a completely ineffective rear guard. So I always struggle with it. Would that still happen today? Like I know there's acts of bravery to save a comrade, but to have the wherewithal as a unit on the ground like that, comprised of people already at war with each other, most likely, between Greek city-states, and having the wherewithal to go, okay, there's the big picture here. I gotta stay and die. This sucks.
Well, and they have this adage of, come back wearing your shield or on it, which was a real Spartan adage at the time. So that's kind of what they looked as Spartans. That's what they looked forward to. I don't know if all of the different Greeks looked forward to that, but definitely the Spartans did.
Absolutely. And then luckily they got their glorious end.
Yes, they did. They did. Most of them. Well, I guess all of them. All of them died.
All the ones that stayed behind.
A lot of people died there.
Well, unfortunately they couldn't they came out to fight in open battle, so Xerxes was able to use his cavalry.
Well, yeah, they just
after that.
Closed in on. They had them fully encircled. They just closed in on them. It was kind of like, again, back to Game of Thrones, like the Battle of the Bastards before the Vale Army shows up. It just collapses down on the Greeks at that point.
Yeah, and God, that'd be a shitty way to die. Just basically standing there waiting to get killed.
The movie does a much better job of like, we're just going to stand here and get shot with a bunch of fucking arrows.
Yeah.
That's a little better.
It's a free-for-all and we're getting shot, so...
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about 300. We're not going to talk about the sequel at all because it was bad and I couldn't even tell you what happened.
It's the worst movie I've ever fucking seen. It was terrible.
Well, that might be going a little far. I've seen worse movies.
Hey.
I've seen a lot of bad movies, but it was mostly forgettable, not very good. We won't talk about it because it doesn't deal with this battle at all anyways.
No.
So let's just talk a little bit real life, quote unquote, as much as scholars think happened versus what happened in the movie. The main thing is that there were a lot more Greeks there, obviously.
Yes. They really it sounds weird to say it, but they hypersexualized it. Like they made it romantic and they inflated quite a bit, but when you look at the facts, it's still fascinating. And they were pretty spot on with a lot of stuff, surprising amounts of stuff.
Yeah, and the other thing that they kind of fudged a little bit, and I can get why they did this, is the kind of the Persian monsters and magic coming at them. And I think a lot of that is probably rooted in the fact that these stories were told from kind of like the movie is done. It's told by a survivor telling the rest of the army, trying to build them up to go fight for their king. So you embellish that. You make it sound like the odds were much worse. And I think for a lot of these Spartans, like they had probably never seen somebody over 6'8". So a 7 foot tall person is going to look like a giant.
Oh, especially when they're like 5'3", 5'4".
Right, exactly. They've never seen an elephant, so an elephant's going to look like a monster at that. Elephants and rhinos are going to look huge in comparison to anything that they've ever seen before. So I think it's emphasized, but all of these monsters are kind of rooted in real life things. It was just, embellished a little bit and over exaggerated because to somebody who's never seen an elephant, like that would be a crazy fucking thing to witness.
Oh, absolutely. And you kind of have to add the some other embellishment somewhere because you can't crossing the Hellespont was a bitch and the Persians tamed the Hellespont. That's a hell of a thing. I'm sure the Spartans were like, holy fuck, dude, he just walked over here. He walked, man. And they were probably freaking out. So you can't really show that on a movie and people being like,
No.
you know, they really did a good job. The Hellespont, if you didn't know, is really persnickety. It'll fuck you up.
Yep. I guess so. Persnickety, I like that. So let's get into the aftermath of the battle. What happened? What do we get from this battle? The victor of the battle. Who won it? Who won the battle? Who won it?
It was obviously
all the Greeks died. So
the Greeks as a whole won this battle.
I don't know that they won the battle. Well, they definitely didn't win the battle.
They win in the end.
They win the
actually,
war.
They did win this battle because they showed that the Persians can be slowed and they can suffer.
Yeah, it was like when Rocky cut Ivan Drago that first time, really.
Yes. He is a man. He bleeds. That's what they won. And I mean, that's a hell of a thing when you're looking, you're across from a impenetrable, undefeatable force. If you can make them bleed, you can make them suffer.
Yeah, they'd never been defeated in battle. I mean, they'd probably been defeated in smaller battles, but for the most part, they conquered whoever they wanted to conquer. And a big thing for the Greeks, even though literally all of them that stayed behind died, the 7 days of this battle held them back enough for the blockade in Artemisium to work. And for the rest of the Spartans, because they fought, the rest of the Spartan army could then go regroup with other Greeks and create a real Greek army to stand up to the Persians. And it gave them enough time to do those things. Had they not held this last stand at Thermopylae, the Greeks would have just been scattered and they wouldn't have been able to kind of come together to, in the end, eventually defeat the Persians.
Yeah, it was the first instance of that really in history where they, as an entire nation, rose up to defeat the enemy when before, just a couple months ago, they're separate city-states fighting amongst themselves for power on a landmass.
Right.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, I mean, that's what came of it. The Greeks got to hold on to their free thinking. I mean, a little bit disheveled at this point, but they got to hold on to their free thinking ways of life for the most part. The Spartans, I don't think ever really fully recovered from that, though. And they kind of started to get on a decline after that.
After they defeated the lion in the room, so they never really needed to be as great anymore. And I think you're right. They lost a lot. They bled a lot in the future battles. They lost a ton of the male population. You can never really bring that back. But I want to say that they probably rode on word of mouth quite a bit. Like, shit, that's a Spartan. If they weren't already badass,
yeah, I'm sure they never had to buy a drink in the Athenian bar ever again.
No, and they had plenty of dates on Tinder. They were ready to go. It's
like the dude who hits the game winner in March Madness. Like, yeah, he's not going to the NBA, but he got his team to the Elite Eight, so he doesn't ever have to buy a drink in this town again.
Damn right.
Yeah. And that's, there are a lot of great battles throughout history. A lot of them stand up to the test of time. This is one of those that, despite being over 2,500 years ago, give or take, people still know about it. People still talk about it. We ran a poll on Twitter earlier that got some votes, not as many as I would have liked, but it got some votes. And a lot of people had learned a bit from 300. A lot of people learned a bit from school and in other ways. So people are still learning about this, even though you don't learn about, I couldn't name one battle that the Roman Empire, held. But I know about this. So it's something that continues throughout history as a teaching point. Why do you think that is?
It's an allusion to the glory of the Western culture. David versus Goliath. I mean, bravery
Great
in the face
underdog
of
story.
sure defeat. Standing up to the corrupt. Sticking to your guns. There's euphemisms on euphemisms on euphemisms. I think, especially as, Americans, it really speaks to a lot of what we, hold dear to us. And at the same time, where do you think we got those from? Shit like this. Like, it's amazing that it's such a bastion of history and everybody sees a little bit of themselves. And I'm sure pretty much everyone on Earth shares some sort of value with what one side or the other was fighting for.
Right. And not only was it, David versus Goliath, 300 versus million, because when the story is told, it's always told as 300 stood up to millions or to tens of thousands, whatever. It's not ever told of, well, it was 7,000 versus 100,000. It's 300 versus 100,000 at least. And, so that's just a great starting point for any story you want to tell.
Absolutely.
And
Leonidas and the Brave 300.
Right. Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire even borrows from that with the Unsullied. They're kind of a mirror to the Spartans. They had basically a last stand like this at Karth where, I want to say it was the Yunkish were trying to invade Karth. The Karthine had hired Unsullied, and the Unsullied were greatly outnumbered, but held a last stand down to the last man, and they basically wore out the much greater Yunkish army. So it stands up, the storytelling framework stands up to current and historical storytelling. It's
Absolutely.
a good story to tell when you can tell that a lot versus a little and the little wins. And not only that, it was free thinking winning over slavery.
Mm-hmm.
The free thinkers, the army of free thinkers were able to defeat the army of slaves.
Yeah, because fuck that. No one wants to be subjugated.
Right.
Freedom is the most beautiful thing ever.
Right. Deep down, when you're fighting, if you're fighting for your way of life versus you're fighting because somebody's holding a gun to your head saying you need to fight, the person who's fighting for their way of life has more motivation to preserve their way of life. The guy with a gun to his head figures, I'm going to die either way, so why am I going to put my all into this?
Yeah, no thanks. No one wants to do that.
No. You got anything else on the Battle of Thermopylae, the movie 300, the movie Meet the Spartans, anything like that?
Never saw Meet the Spartans.
I watched it. I couldn't tell you one joke from it.
I was going to say, I heard it was absolute garbage.
Yeah. I watched it. I can't see that movie is worse than the 300 sequel. So there you go. There's one right there.
Yep, there you go. You win. You have proven me wrong, sir. I mean, there's some cool action scenes in that 300 movie, but that's
about all that saves it.
I don't know anything about the battle that it was about. For the most part, like it's something that's not really on my radar, so it doesn't have as much meaning to me. Because after your second, third, fourth, fifth watch of 300, you're like, holy shit, so much of this is accurate that it's scary.
Well, and I'd much rather go back and just watch 300 again than watching this bad sequel.
It's super good, and it's the hyper stylized action. It's got, I was a teenager when I first saw that, so I was just like, holy shit, this is crazy.
Well, yeah, knowing nothing about Zack Snyder and how he killed Watchmen and Sucker Punch and, the Justice League stuff, like, if you were to say, like, somebody who's only known Zack Snyder in the last 7 years, if you were to be like, no, you got to watch this movie about this 2,500-year-old battle. The dude from Justice League did it, but trust me, it's good. Like, nobody's going to buy into that. But at the time, Zack Snyder was kind of this unknown quantity, and this was the first movie that looked like that.
Yeah, I mean, this was such a huge movie that changed the game.
And it's so the scenes are so beautiful, and the over stylized action, like you said, is just amazing, and just the freeze frames that they pull off throughout, the slow motion is done perfectly. Like, there's a lot of good filmmaking in it. I don't know if good filmmaking is the right word, but
I think you're
beautiful
right,
and exciting filmmaking, at least.
Yeah, it's good cinematography, and they
right. I mean, it's not going to win an Oscar, but it looks cool, and I want to see it.
Well, that's in my head. That's the type of shit that I imagine when this battle's going down. Everybody does that.
Right.
It's fun to think about what happened there, and I got a movie to watch that's pretty cool and sweet. That that puts me in that mindset.
Yeah, totally agree. That's all we got for the Battle of Thermopylae.
Absolutely. If you guys have any questions, holler at us.
Or just general thoughts on why we suck or are great. Love those too.
We're pretty great.
Yeah, I thought so too. Maybe if you have more fun facts about the Battle of Thermopylae that we didn't cover, or we got something completely wrong, let us know. We're on Twitter at APA something and at alone_podcast.
Yep. at alone_podcast.
There we go. That's it. You can always email us at apodcastaboutSomething@gmail.com. And we're out there.
We're out there. Hit us up.
We've gotten a lot of good conversations going lately, and I like that. I like getting good conversations. So if you listen and you have thoughts, just throw them at us. We'll probably talk to you about it because we already talked about it for an hour. We can talk more on it, obviously.
Oh yeah, and I'm always game to interact with you guys. We love the fact you're listening, and we appreciate it so very, very much.
Yeah, if you're on iTunes, make sure you rate and review. You can support the show through Patreon at patreon.com/podcastaboutsomething. There is a donut. I'm going to call it a donut button every time. I'm just going to change it to a donut button so I'm not wrong. There's a donate button on our website on the About Me page where you can just do a one-time donation. Any little bit helps. And like I said before, we're probably going to get some merch going. Also, make sure you check out the One Shining Seinfeld Moment bracket that will be going on through April 8th. And there's still room to vote for, I think there's 3 more rounds to vote on. So keep tuned to that. It's on Twitter all the day. There's links and everything there. So check that out. Need as many votes as we can get. Got to get George to the finish line.
Let's do it.
The music for A Podcast About Something is provided by Those Cats.
And you guys stay sassy.
Stay classy.
We now return control of this feed to the original owner. Thank you for your cooperation.